I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I work and live with respect, honour and compassion. I recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. I pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and hopes of Aboriginal Australia. Hello Alex and fellow students, I'm Sarah Keeling and it is a pleasure to be able to interact with you all in this manner. The topic of discussion this week centres around adaptive cycles. I will identify and describe the different stages of transformation of a system in relation to an economic example. The chosen example is the stock market.com boom and bust of 1995 to 2002. Transformation in a complex adaptive system is a building block for and depends upon resilience. Burks, Colding and Folk wrote that resilience was the capacity to lead a continued existence by incorporating change, and stresses the importance of assuming change and explaining stability instead of assuming stability and explaining change. Through the study of multiple ecosystems, researchers have learned that systems of nature proceed through recurring cycles consisting of 4 phases: rapid growth, conservation, release, and reorganisation. This is known as an adaptive cycle and describes the way that an ecosystem organises itself in response to a changing world. The notion of an adaptive cycle developed as a useful metaphor for describing change in ecological systems. However, it also has relevance for how social systems, social ecological, and economic systems change through time. And though we use the term cycle, the important part is the existence of the 4 phases. The rapid growth phase, or R phase, occurs early in the cycle as the system is engaged in rapid growth. New opportunities and available resources are exploited. The system's components are weakly interconnected and regulated. Successful R phase organisms prosper under high environmental variation and operate over short timeframes. In an environmental context, this usually refers to weeds. In economic systems, they are the innovators and entrepreneurs who seize upon opportunities such as the explosive growth of Google and other dot-com companies. The dot-com bubble from 1995 to 2002 was a time when innovation surpassed heritage. The soaring prices of internet startup companies encouraged investors to contribute liberally to new innovative companies that were taking advantage of the newfound popularity of the internet. This encouraged internet companies to form with little knowledge of business and planning in order to capitalize on the plethora of investors. The transition to the conservation phase, or K phase, proceeds incrementally. During this phase, energy gets stored and materials slowly accumulate. Connections increase and some of the participants change, though by the end of the growth phase, few, if any, new participants are able to establish. These K strategists live longer and are more conservative and efficient in their use of resources. They operate across larger scales and longer time periods, often translating as a move toward more specialization and the greater efficiencies of large economies of scale. Bigger machines and outputs, smaller costs, and larger profits over longer timeframes. The growth rate slows as connectedness increases. The system becomes more and more rigid and resilience declines. The cost of efficiency is a loss in flexibility. Different ways of performing the same function are eliminated in favour of doing the function in the most efficient way. In market terms, and using the dot-com bubble as an example, the plethora of investors led to the price of stocks being driven up due to the fact that other people buying these stocks perceived security in the process, leading to trading based on criteria that had nothing to do with the fundamentals of the companies being traded. Transition from the conservation phase to the release phase can happen rapidly. The longer the conservation phase, the smaller the shock needed to end it. A disturbance that exceeds the system's resilience breaks apart its web of reinforcing interactions. Resources that were tightly bound are now released as connections break and regulatory controls weaken. The loss of structure continues as linkages are broken, and natural, social, and economic capital leaks out of the system. Though the dynamics of the release phase are chaotic, the destruction that ensues has a creative element and becomes a source for reorganization and renewal. Eventually, in the dot-com bubble, traditional investors realized that they would not gain significant returns and sold. This had a cumulative effect. The bubble burst and prices began to tumble. The dot-com burst led to the stock market losing $5 trillion in market capitalization. On October 9, 2002, the Nasdaq 100 had dropped 78% from its peak. The reorganization phase, unlike the chaotic release phase, is a time of reorganization and renewal. Small chance events have the opportunity to powerfully shape the future. Invention, experimentation, and reassortment thrive and begin to create a new identity for the system. The dot-com bubble itself was part of the reorganization phase after the 1987 crash. The 1987 crash, also known as Black Monday, occurred on October 19, 1987, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 22.6% in one day. This affected all 23 major world markets, and Australia's market fell by 40%. The information that the dot-com bubble was originally part of a reorganization phase demonstrates the cyclical nature of the stock market as an economic example of a complex adaptive system that moves through these four phases in a constant loop. A system usually passes through an adaptive cycle by moving through the four phases in the order described here. But this is not always the case. Systems cannot go directly from the release phase back to a conservation phase, but almost all of the moves can occur. By examining the stock market as a complex adaptive system, we can also examine the transformation cycles associated with the stock market. I look forward to communicating with everyone and hearing your thoughts on this interesting and complicated topic. I hope that you will find that my questions inspire thoughtful discussion. My time is up, and I thank you for yours. Be well, do good deeds, and keep in touch.